introduce us. We are some fine, young, very educated guys and gals. We've gotten gussied up in almost terrifying guises, as we do every year, ready to violate, annihilate, and cleanse our souls. But things took a turn.
Well, okay, that's enough. That's enough. It's creepy. What do we make of 10 years of living with the Purge and all its various incarnations? My main issue is I don't think the screenwriter understands what cleansing a soul means.
I can't believe of the two movies that we're talking tonight, you chose The Purge to do a sound clip from. That's what I'm most upset about right now.
Well, I mean, we will have plenty of opportunities to do our Immortan Joe impressions, I'm sure.
What are we talking about tonight? We're talking about Mad Max Fury Road, which came out, 2015, and The Purge, which came out in 2013. What episode are we on in our cycle? I always lose this. Where are we?
This is just number 2. This is number 2, Dan.
Number 2, the 2010. We record out of cycle.
Yeah,
so 2010s, Mad Max Fury Road, The Purge. The theme is Future Wars, which is sort of like sci-fi, but every sci-fi movie is kind of like Future Wars, so they all kind of fit. We have a special guest, Tommy, from Haven't Seen It.
Welcome.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
What's been going on? What's been going on with your podcast? What have you guys been doing recently?
Yeah, so we're Haven't Seen It. We cover movies that one or me or my co-host Tim has never seen before, and we just finished up our spooky month, October. We did Saw, Carrie, and Psycho. All movies that my co-host Tim has never seen because he hates horror. And he's pleasantly surprised, like Psycho and all the others.
Nice.
The Gus Van Sant version, right?
Oh, of course.
Why?
The definitive version.
Yeah, the shot-for-shot remake with Vince freaking Vaughn. It's hard to believe that even exists. Like, how did that even possible?
Yeah, how'd that slip through the cracks right there? Why do people get Gus Van Sant money for that? But no, we watched that for Hitchcock.
Nice. All right, how do I want to jump into this? I like doing the personal history stuff.
Yeah.
Like, when we first do this, I'll start. I'm going to dive right in.
Yeah, go do it.
Mad Max Fury Road. So I was living in New York at the time, and I had these like really film nerdy friends, and they wanted me to go to this movie, and I was like, ugh, whatever. I don't want to go to this. And we went like opening weekend or whatever, and they were enthralled with this movie. They walked out of it like high as a kite. They're like, that was the coolest thing that I've ever seen in my life. It's amazing. And me, being the curmudgeon that I can be, was like, it's okay. I don't know. It's pretty good.
What the hell? Damn.
Yeah, that's what I felt back then, at least. I don't know. What about you guys? Did you guys see it recently for the first time, or kind of saw it when it came out?
So I saw it in theaters back in 2015, which would have been my senior year of college. I was visiting my parents at the time, and they wanted to go see this. Like, we heard there's a good movie and great things about it. So we saw it, all three of us together. My parents hated it. They're like, I don't understand how this got good reviews. What the hell? And meanwhile, I was just like, this movie fucking rocks. I don't know what you guys are talking about. So was glad to revisit this. This is my first rewatch of it ever, because I always want to see it on the big screen again. That didn't happen. So instead, I tested out my soundbar tonight.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I also saw it in the theaters pretty shortly after it came out. I think I had a healthy skepticism because of the amount of hype, but it was one of those movies where it's like, doesn't matter how much hype there was, I was enthralled, and it felt there was a lot of discourse at the time regarding like whether it was the whole like Scorsese Marvel thing, right? Like, are movies meant to be more escapist thrill rides, or are they meant to like, provoke thought and feeling? And this just felt like this kind of holy grail of combining the two. And it was one of my top movies of the year. I loved it so much that I introduced it into my syllabus for film studies at the high school I teach at. And we watched it probably like 4 semesters in a row before I wanted to try something else out for that unit. which was actually a fantasy unit, because I was trying to figure out a way to shoehorn in Mad Max Fury Road, but I also didn't want to give up the typical action adventure options that are on the table, and also because it's honestly is a piece of speculative fiction. We're talking about future wars is our theme, and while it encompasses a lot more than just like classic sci-fi elements, I think this is one of those movies that you can have as much fun with it as you can deconstructing its politics. And I think, especially compared to like the very kind of cursory glances I had given to the Mad Max franchise prior to that, like I'd seen them all, but mostly just like either on daytime television as a kid, edited for cable, or I did like try to do an honest watch of the original 1979 Mad Max back when in advance of Fury Road coming out, and none of those movies ever hit me the way that this one did. And I'm curious what your all experiences are with both this franchise and the director George Miller in general, because it just feels like such a kind of strange case when it comes to franchise filmmaking.
Tom, you go for it. Have you seen the originals?
So when I saw this for the first time in theaters, I'm pretty sure it was the first Mad Max movie I saw in general, which was kind of like the weird way I started off with like filmography. Like the first Indiana Jones movie I ever saw was Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Not a great way to start off with that franchise.
Whoa, dude, that's crazy. That's kind of trippy as well.
It was definitely not the best idea I had, but so I went back and like I think I've only rewatched Mad Max or watched Mad Max 2 since seeing Fury Road. And I don't have I love Mel Gibson. Lethal Weapon movies were like my favorite shit back in the day and all that. But Mad Max outside Fury Road didn't really connect with me as much. I guess it felt a little more quaint, I guess, the older movies, which I do love the 80s, but it just didn't have that same kinetic energy I feel like this one does.
Yeah. I have never seen Mad Max 2, or Mad Max Beyond the Thunderdome.
What?
Never seen them. Wow. I actually have no interest either. I don't know. It's one of those things. It's like it was always around and it was on TV and stuff, and I've seen like clips, but I was just sort of like, and that's kind of when I went to go see this. Is like, whatever. Like it's a Mad Max movie. I was never interested before. Why would I be interested in this one? And I don't know. I mean, I just never. And George Miller, I mean, what a weirdo. I mean, he's got like Babe. I mean, Lorenzo's Oil. I mean, he wrote Babe. He didn't direct it. Lorenzo's Oil, Happy Feet 2. I mean, Happy Feet is the reason that they got to get to making this one. So he also did 3,000 Years of Longing. Did you guys see that one? That was last year.
No, it looks really
fascinating.
Yeah, it was a flop too, right?
Total flop.
And was not marketed at all. I mean, I remember hearing about it.
Zero.
But I mean, I think my only experience of George Miller prior to my first watch of Fury Road was the Babe movies, because I remember watching them when I was a kid. Yeah. Totally. Which is such a weird filmography.
Yeah, he's all over the place. But I don't know. This one just kind of lives on an island for me, Mad Max Fury Road, and it's like, I'm cool with that, because I think I get my fill of what this is all about in one movie. All right, where do you guys want to dive into this? I mean, it's kind of a weird sort of, what Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome came out in 85, and so this comes out 30 years later. It was supposed to come out early in the 2000s. I think he got the idea maybe in the late 90s to do another Mad Max movie. And they tried to get it going with Mel Gibson, reprising his role or whatever. And then 9/11 happened, and things kind of fell apart. And they're getting ready to go. I think they're supposed to shoot in 2003. And then the Iraq War and all that kind of stuff. And it just sort of, the whole thing fell to pieces. And then it came back around later in the 2010s. But again, it's like one of those movies that, use development hell as a term, right? And this is definitely one of those films where it felt like stop, start. And the fact that it even got made feels kind of like a miracle. And when you hear like the production stories and how it was going, this thing was brutal. I mean, like a 9-month-long shoot, I think. And that's just the first shoot. They had to come back and reshoot stuff because they literally pulled the plug on the movie right near the end without them shooting the finale. So it's one of those movies where you're just like, well, how, you look at it on screen and you're like, this is, I think that's the first thing I would love to talk about is the look of this movie and the feel of this movie and the vibe is so spectacular, right? It is so grandiose in a way that movies, despite the fact that we have movies today about superheroes and they're going to different worlds, these grandiose ideas, but it's all CGI and it doesn't feel the same. And I think when you watch, at least when I watch Mad Max Fury Road, it just feels like it's not even necessarily a throwback, but it just feels way more visceral than your typical action movie. Would you guys agree with that?
Absolutely. Like it has this element to it where it's not just the realness, it's also the surrealness because I mean, I don't know of any other movies, much less set piece heavy movies that are filmed in the Namibian desert that just is such a like why did it take over a century of filmmaking for somebody to like find this place and set something insane there, because it doesn't feel earthly, and yet so much of that aesthetic that George Miller had in the original trilogy comes back like with a vengeance. Like it's not just like souped up monster cars with blades on top of them. It's like you also got to add a guy who plays guitar on the front and flames burst out of the fretboard, right? Like that alone is just like so iconic that it's already a miracle. Not to even dive into the origins of how this eventually got made. And I think so much of that has to do with the fact that not only is this a movie of multiple kind of awe-inspiring set pieces, but it essentially is just like one giant set piece, which is kind of the kernel of the idea that George Miller started with when he wanted to revisit the universe. He basically
this movie
had no
just feels
in
like
doing
tactile
that for the majority of the 90s.
Oh.
Tommy, go ahead.
Sorry, cut out for a second. So I was saying that pretty much this movie is just so tactile in a way that you don't really see action movies at all this way. I mean, when you do the green screen stuff, you can see a cool alien planet, but you just feel like you're in a PS2 video game over and over and over again. So in this movie, I mean, like it's shocking that there's like a place on planet Earth we can find just like this, and it almost feels like it's something out of like a Wile E. Coyote cartoon, but in all the best ways. I mean, it's just like you don't see movies this like tactile, this kinetic, this like when you see them like do stuff with like the people on the poles launching the car to car, it's actually right there, and you're like, how the hell did this happen? How did someone not die doing this? And just holy shit, what an achievement!
And that's one of the things that Steven Soderbergh was put on record saying is, how did this movie get made without, actually putting people in physical danger, much less getting them hurt? And it obviously was a very stressful shoot to the point where there had to be a lot of more precautions added into the production measures for Furiosa coming out next year. But it still is absolutely amazing that for the most part, this seems to be like a really carefully calibrated and put together team effort that also has just like so much insanity built into it that it really is one of a kind.
Yeah, it's funny. Like the thing that sticks out to me immediately when you on first watching, going back to it, is the stunt work. It's just like, how are you doing this? Like, how are you making performers do this? And there's a great quote from one of the guys who's a stunt performer from I think it was like an oral history of the film. He goes, on most films like this, you're working your way up to a stunt. Maybe there's one a week. But on this film, from the time your day starts, you're already doing a stunt. And then there's another one on top of that. It was a stuntman's dream. And you can see that on screen because it's just constant action and risk and danger. And, you know, I think my initial criticism of the movie when I first saw it was like, there's no story. Right? It's just, there's not really a story here. It's basically like one big long chase. And I think with age, I've realized that like not everything needs to have a 3-act structure. This one probably does in some way. But yeah, it's in a weird way, it's kind of so, it's an action movie distilled in a way where there's not a lot of room for character development because there's so much going on. But for some reason, it's okay because I think the main characters are so archetypal that we don't really need a lot of backstory. We kind of know what Thomas Hardy's all about and Charlize Theron's character all about Furiosa. We don't need necessarily like a sketch of where they are. And we get a little bit of it when they get to like sort of, I forget what it is, but it's the colony that you used to live in. It's gone. Mm. And so there's, you know, and there's a breakdown moment where it's like all the hopes of like getting out and this new, you know, going back home are over. And so they have to go back to the Citadel and do that whole thing. But yeah, did you guys find the story to be, is it just flashy and these stunts and this violence and this absurdism in a way? It's like absurdist violence and like action. So it's very fun. What did you think of the narrative of it? Like the emotional arc of it?
I think on first watch, I didn't really find much substance within the story, like whatsoever. I think that's why my parents also hated it at the time, because like, what do we just watch? Just a chase. But on rewatch, I mean, there is just such a like rich subtext right here, and just like, you know, broad strokes. I think it's better that this movie casted Tom Hardy as Mad Max, and compared to the version if we had Mel Gibson 20 years before, assuming you know, not kind of the graphics or anything. That was because if we had Mel Gibson in this movie, it would have felt more like, oh, well, I need to see the other Mad Maxes. And it would have been like, well, why isn't Mel Gibson talking more in this movie and everything like that? Instead, with Tom Hardy, we have a little bit more of a blank slate right here. And it's okay that he's not vocal. It's okay that he's not really the main character in a way. Because if it's Mel Gibson, like, what the fuck is this? Like, So, but overall, the story in general, just like, it's basically, let's go back and forth to one place, but there's more in it once you think about it.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that actually thrilled me the most upon that initial watch was actually that kind of archetypal aspect of it, combined where there's like kind of two different factors. Number one, going to your point about absurdity, Dan, is like it essentially felt like a single scene of a Buster Keaton movie stretched out to 2 hours, where that you could have like essentially nothing but silent archetypes getting into pickles over and over again, and how somehow like slithering their way out of it. But then the piece that really like kind of drives it home and makes it more than just two dimensions is that those archetypes and that absurdism is also very much steeped in kind of like revolution imagery and very kind of subtextual subversiveness that like you guys mentioned plays a lot better on rewatch. But I think even like part of the thrill is not knowing what's going to happen, not knowing that Max is actually not going to be our protagonist, not knowing that Furiosa is not only going to turn her back on Immortan Joe, but also is going to like never really fully warm up to Max, and that they're going to constantly kind of play off each other, even if they are also essentially working in tandem against the evil forces at bay. Like, this is such a feminist action film in a time period where we had so many like supposed feminist action films, and yet this is the only one that really kind of gives its female protagonist true like agency and authority over the proceedings and not just like kind of seen as a figurehead. Because the whole point of the movie is it's anti-figurehead. So I love that about it. And like when you're fully on that ride with Furiosa, and even though you enjoy like the details of the supporting characters, like the brides and Nux, you still have this really solid. Yeah, they're, all that stuff is just as interesting, but because because you're in the passenger seat with Furiosa, just like Max is essentially like an avatar. There's also like some like video game aspect of what's going on here in terms of like perspective and adventure, and that plays just as much of a role, I think, narratively into what makes the movie work. More so than, well, not more so, but at least equally as so much as the actual action that's happening and stunt work and all that.
It really proves that this movie is like less is more in terms of dialogue and everything like that.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It could have been over-explained to hell. I've been like, here's who I am, here's what I'm doing, and everything like that. You don't need that. You just need to know the basic strokes of the story, and that's all that really is necessary in this.
Yeah, and the side characters are so strong. I think that's like what makes the maybe slight main, narrative of Furiosa and Mad Max, where it's like, there's obviously stuff going on. They're propelling the story forward, but it's the interactions of like the wives, who are like half of them are famous now, by the way. I don't know if they were famous back then, but like I went back and watched. I was like, wait a second, like these are all people that are big now. And Nicholas Hoult, right? Isn't that Nux? Who Nux is? Yeah. He's phenomenal in it. I don't know. It is one of those films that I still think the narrative's pretty unorthodox, and it doesn't necessarily like you wouldn't take this script to like one of those screenwriting classes and be like, oh yeah, this is how you do it, because you read it and you'd be like, what? And like Zoe Kravitz had a great like little tidbit where she like was locked in a room to read the script, and she was like, I have no idea what the hell is going on, because the thing read like it was a comic book. It was like storyboards instead of a script. So it's like there's the whole thing is bizarre, and it just reminds me a little bit that we think of, we always think it's very commonly perceived that Hollywood is some sort of factory. Like it's some sort of like MCU factory where everything's cookie cutter and you have to have, an MBA to like produce a film or something like that. And it's all these formulas and stuff. There's nothing formulaic about how this movie was made. Like it was basically the fact that like, everybody had enough cachet in the industry to say, hey, we want to do this again. I've got another idea. And, Mel Gibson was involved, like as a producer in this one, obviously didn't star in it, but he helped propel it forward. And it was like almost like a blank canvas to let like these weirdos really just run wild, because you hear about how this thing was shot and it's like, why would Zoe Kravitz need to be on a 9-month shoot? You know what I mean? Like she's in the movie just, throughout it, but like 9 months, like the average movie is like a 40-day shoot. Like this is insane. And like the locations and all the cars, it's just, I love movies like this because it reminds me that there is still some magic left in that entire industry, where if like you get the right people together at the right moment who are like insanely persistent and just weird and creative enough to make something bonkers like this, you get a movie that is like, I don't know, this one kind of feels like a masterpiece to me, in the sense that like it just is so vibrant. It is so interesting and rich and layered in so many different ways that like you could easily, and this is one of the first films I bought on I just started my 4K collection. This is one of the first things I bought. I was like, it's got to be in the collection, because it's just so up there in terms of its I don't know, it's one of those movies you toss on and it immediately engages you. But I did want to talk about like a little bit about like the kind of the deeper messaging here, because Chris, you mentioned like the feminist part of it, and like it's definitely there, but like what else is going on? What other sort of messaging do you guys see in it?
Well, just to kind of put a cap on the feminist thing, unless you guys want more to say about it, I think I was remiss to not mention the fact that the movie was edited by Margaret Sixel, who is also George Miller's wife, and that she had essentially never edited a film before when
Whoa.
she got behind the editing board for this one. But because she was already a visual artist, Miller basically just said, like, I want to see what happens, because he had that revolutionary kind of like anti-establishment mindset. Like you're saying, there's no formulas here, even though there are tons of like tried and true methods that, you know, both George Miller himself had popularized in action filmmaking with the original trilogy, and also just like new. It's almost like I love how it just kind of cuts through the bullshit of like what should be expected in terms of like professionalism and the studio system, and it's just like such a kind of punk rock ethic to making a movie, which totally matches the vibe of this movie. And some of the best bits of both the comedy and the action are because those edits are so like shocking, because she doesn't follow that typical roadmap. She's judging it based on her skills as an artist rather than probably any number of things. Kind of like also Thelma Schoonmaker, Scorsese's editor, had no formal training originally, and she's been doing it for years, and now she's like doing 3.5-hour movies that are still getting called, you know, best movies of the year. So like this is not just like feminist filmmaking. This is also just like radical filmmaking.
Yeah. It just makes it just so like rapid paced in a way that you haven't really seen before. I mean, Sixel herself has said apparently that like she took on this movie because she said because if a guy did it, it would look like every other action movie. And you could see this being a generic ass action movie and just like awful and like, yeah, maybe it looks cool, but whatever. But instead, this has like just a real beating heart. Apparently, she had to edit I think 470 hours of film, which took her like a month to go through. So like that's why it took 9 months, because they filmed probably like fucking 10 movies out of this, and she had to condense that.
And then like the funny part is when they pulled the plug, and it's like they had to go into post production without the ending film, and so they're like editing a movie without an ending, you know, and then like have to go back, and then luckily like I think it was the boss got fired, and they gave him more cash to shoot it the ending, and it's everything about this thing, it just the way it all clicks together, but it's so bizarre. It is so strange. And like when I went back and watched, like, yeah, this is amazing, but like there's nothing else like this that I've seen recently that like even like holds a candle to like how bizarre this film is, which adds so much charm to it. I feel like, I don't know.
I'm curious. There were some rumors back when the film initially blew up, and there was talk of Miller essentially like using this as a springboard for a new trilogy. And we know we've got Furiosa coming out next year, which is supposedly like an origin story. I don't know. The jury's still out. You're gonna have to do a lot of work to get me to care about an origin story movie for an existing character, but. There was also talk of kind of the other two aspects politically of this film kind of getting fleshed out in future potential installments of the franchise, one of which is more apparent, which is the kind of environmentalist perspective, because of, you know, the way that and that's honestly just like, it's so simple, but it's so just like impactful because of the intensity of it, of like the giant water spigot and the way that it, you know, the water is controlled amongst the masses at the bottom of the cliff and all that, and this talk of the green place and essentially kind of doing a reverse water world, so to speak.
I was thinking of water world as you were saying that.
Yeah. And obviously all the like focus on gas or gasoline and oil seems to be a part of that, both aesthetic and kind of political agenda, which plays a lot different, I think, in 2015 than any of those movies probably played back in the 80s when no one was thinking about that, or very few people were. And then the third aspect is the race aspect, which is not really in your face at all, because, you know, most of these characters are white. But Miller said in an interview, when kind of and maybe this is just him spitballing because that's what he does in a lot of these press circuit things. Like the fact that, since the whole universe is essentially this totalitarianist dictatorship, all about control. And so we're controlling the women as the brides. We're controlling the environment as the water keepers, that there would be also kind of a similar respect with regards to race. But I don't know if that will happen or get teased more or come to fruition at all, because the thing that really stood out to me more than that was like this kind of weird thing going on with like the health and bodies of the characters, where that's part of the control method too, right? Like the war boys are literally using humans like Max as blood bags so that they can have enough like literal energy to like go out into the field and be soldiers. So I'm curious what you guys make of that, and if we can kind of just have a little bit of fun of like, what do you want to see from like these potential future movies, Furiosa included?
I feel like in general the sequels to any of these Mad Max movies can't just be another chase movie, because it just feel like a retread. It'll just feel like over and over again. So I need like something a little bit more energetic, a little different. I mean, Mad Max 2 was more of like a defense movie, if I remember, kind of like Assault on Precinct 13. So just an inventive way just to tell a story. And obviously with Furiosa, I mean, like I'm excited for it. I'm sure it's going to be good under George Miller's hands, but if it's dialogue heavy, then it's just kind of almost missing the point of what you had with Fury Road. You need this to be a visual, kinetic type of franchise, and it's just in a way that they need to find a way to break new ground with this new movie, because there's a lot of expectation at this point, almost 10 years later.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and say the new one's not gonna be good. It just feels like this is such lightning in a bottle to me. And maybe that's like one of those, I keep on saying that with these movies because maybe that's what it seems like when you look back, right? And you're like, oh, like how did this happen? Well, this had to happen, that had to happen. And it does feel like that, but I don't know. Like here's the thing. I think the movie works because it doesn't really explore the world that it's created. It's just assumed that world exists, because I'm not sure the ideas behind what's going on in this world are all like, you think about it, like with the body stuff, or with the entire concept of worshiping cars and, diesel or gasoline. It's interesting, but it's kind of simplistic, I would say, as like an apocalyptic sort of future war concept. I compare this to something like Terminator, and it's like Terminator seems a lot more sophisticated than this, or maybe The Matrix. It kind of falls into the Matrix camp, where it's like I'm a little bit worried that the more they explore that world, the worse everything's going to get, and that's kind of what happened with The Matrix.
I do agree with you. It's just the thing that, like, the more and more you get into the exposition, the less I get interested in, especially in like fantasy type films. I might be a minority in this, but I did not like the movie Dune, the most recent one.
Okay. We just talked about it. Yeah.
Granted, I watched it on my tablet at work, so that might have been a factor. But anyways,
sacrilegious.
Too.
Oh my god!
I don't know. I just didn't see it in theaters, but
it's amazing in theaters, and that's the only reason that I loved it, or one of the reasons I loved it, because it's so great on theater.
Yeah, but for me, like personally, I felt like a movie that like was just bogged down in exposition, over-explained everything, where it felt like, oh god, this is just boring exposition. Like I don't need all this stuff. like you don't need to tell me for like 10 minutes what this is and this. It's like, all right, like one reason why I like movies like Mad Max Fury Road is just that it gets us straight to the point right there. We don't need all the extra exposition in this fantasy world, because it would have been annoying if it was just like hearing this is why these guys are mutated and stuff like that. You don't need to know. It's just it's not the point of the movie.
What that reminds me of is when I showed it to my students, that was kind of the key takeaway post-film discussion, was that they had never like felt like they were just dropped into a world of a movie like that before, and kind of having to pick the piece, like having to do work to put the pieces together while also being like constantly entertained by the chase that's happening in front of them. And just a detailed example of that would be like the silver kind of meth or whatever it is that they spray on their faces.
What is that?
I mean, that's the thing. It's like it's never explained. It's not even never even given a name, but just like the context clues. And I'm an English teacher, so I'm all about them context clues. You're able to like easily put together through these visual signifiers, whether it's Nux spraying himself in advance of like doing like a crazy jump from one car to the next, or it's a Morton Joe kind of using it as like a blessing, like a communion wafer almost to his disciples as they go and risk their stupid ass lives for this evil monster.
Witness me. I love when they say that.
Right. Oh my god! And that's cool. Like the little dialogue that is there. It's just like so kind of apocryphal and mysterious that I mean, I'm sure I would be surprised if there isn't like a Mad Max Fury Road glossary on the internet somewhere.
There's definitely a Wikipedia at least.
There's a whole, but that to me speaks to the long development cycle. Mm-hmm. Whereas, like, he probably had this idea, like, sounds like in the late 90s, where he just came up with this concept. And I'm sure that, like, in his head, he just kept on building it and building it and building it and building it. And he had, like, this whole, like, a show Bible, whatever they call it, before it even filmed, that, like, stuff like, you know, the blood boy or the huffing of whatever, like paint or something, that was all, you know, in the gestation period. Like there's no improv of that. That's like somebody developing the story so deeply and richly before even a single camera rolls. That like he, in his head, he probably wasn't even like, I don't need to explain this. It's obvious what it is. You know, because he thought about it like 5 years before. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's a little bit of just trusting your audience and just like making them realize they'll be able to fill in the gaps themselves. We don't need to have it all explained out in front of us.
Here's a quick question. Could this movie be made today?
What, 8 years later?
Yeah.
I would say no.
What? Okay, explain yourself.
MCU.
What does that mean?
Okay. There is like no, I just don't see it now. I mean, I just feel like
it depends. I mean, if you still had like someone like George Miller under the helm, then like he could probably have the cachet to be like, yeah, we're doing this all natural. We're filming this in fucking actual locations. But I mean, if it was just a work for hire, if this was like random, like Louis Lee Terror, whatever the fuck his name is, it would probably be all green screen.
Yeah, I don't. Chris, what do you think it could be? Right?
Yeah, I mean, because it has like a very not only different pedigree, but also like ethic in terms of like, I mean, we still have ridiculous deals happening between auteur directors and movie studios. And you look back at 2015, Oppenheimer, Killers of the Flower Moon. Like, I think it's maybe even metastasized a bit with, you know, the involvement of the streamers and the day and date stuff
that's a good point.
With COVID, where like you look back at 2015, like I was just kind of reminding myself of the superhero movies that came out then. That was the first Ant-Man, it was Age of Ultron, and it was the Josh Trank Fantastic Four. So like you had this pretty wide spectrum of you know, between, I mean, in my opinion, a wide spectrum between shit and serviceable. And you're going to need those movies like Fury Road that stand out, that maybe don't make as much as an MCU movie, but still like have this kind of, I mean, studios are always kind of trying to play for the cult canon to some degree, right? Sure. Even if they're not going to get a biopic about a physicist to rake in $900 million.
I mean, you can still see the fingerprints of this movie all over other places. Like, I don't know if you guys saw the movie on Hulu earlier this year, No One Will Save You. the Alien movie.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and that movie is another movie that is even more so than this, dialogue free and just essentially just as a visual medium right there. You're only getting the any of the action and stuff like that through visual mediums. In a way that kind of made me connected to this movie on this rewatch.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's a limited series, like Netflix would throw some cash this way. I don't know.
Speaking of Chris Nolan, he actually mentioned how Fury Road was at the forefront of his mind when he made Dunkirk 2 years later. And I don't like Dunkirk, but you can see, like,
I can see it, yeah.
The fingerprints of, like, you know, I mean, it's Nolan, so he's a little bit smooth brained, but he is like thinking in terms of like set piece over traditional narrative 3-act structure.
And yet he made one of the most boring films I've ever seen in my entire life.
Which one are you referring to?
It's like visual ambient. So bad. All right, let's talk about The Purge. Let's talk about our second movie.
Oh my gosh. Can we get 20 minutes out of this thing?
Yeah, easily. 2013, The Purge. Do you guys remember when this came out?
Oh yeah, no, I remember. I didn't see it in theaters. This is my first watch ever. Because at the time, my friends told me that This Is the End, the Seth Rogen movie, was actually scarier, and I was like, I'm not seeing the fucking Purge then.
I love that. That's great. I don't know if I saw this. I did not see this in a theater. No, I kind of was not super into movies in this moment for some reason, or I was too busy with something. And I didn't see this in the theaters. I think I saw it maybe on VOD or something. And I was still following the box office, and I knew that it had done really well. And I was like, oh, that's cool. You know, it's like one of these Jason Blum movies where, you know, here's $3 million, here's $4 million. You don't get a cent more. Do what you can do. We don't expect it to do well, but if it does do well, we're all going to make a lot of money. And this just happened. The Purge just happened to be one that like hit. And yeah, I don't know. I remember seeing it back then. And I was like, because it had this sort of hype to it because of its success and kind of the interesting idea. But then watching it, I was like, what the hell is this? Like, this is like boring as hell. Yeah. It's really not that interesting. And like, they did a good job cutting trailers and like getting like a generally kind of menacing vibe to everything. And like, there was almost like a hype around the concept more than the film itself.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. It was a movie that always felt like that. It was just, here's the concept. That's cool.
And then you actually see the movie and you're like, well, it just takes place in a house. Like, this is like
chamber drama.
Yeah. And like, the filmmakers even point that out. They're like, oh yeah, we didn't really have any money. So we just had to film in this Nicholas.
Yeah.
We thought people would be pissed. And I was like, I kind of was, but I don't know if everybody else was. I don't know. And then what's the rewatch looking like for you guys? Or Chris, did you see it when it came out?
No, hell no.
No, yeah.
This was a movie that I actively avoided. Not so much because I knew it would be bad, but more so because actually the concept like skeeved me out at the time. It was just like I love horror movies. I am all about like violence in cinema, stylized violence, but like it was this like period of time where I don't know, there was so much. I had a 1-year-old, and so I was very much like wholesome dad 101 in 2013. Add that to the fact that like, I don't know, like there's something just, home invasion movies in general have always kind of been fascinating to me. But when you have a home invasion movie that explicitly like plays into this notion of like the average person will kill if you just give them a chance to do it, I find like kind of morally offensive, to be honest. And I think that it was just that whole idea just turned me off. The thing that actually got me interested though is my wife and I went to Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Studios a few years ago, and they had so they always do like these Universal horror movie themed haunted houses, and they're like legit haunted houses. And they had a Purge themed one, and I was like, oh, I don't know, I don't really want to go to that, but we did because we wanted to hit them all up, get our money's worth. And there was something about the vibe that was like it was this interesting combination of trashy and just like really disgusting that I was like, okay, I think I'm starting to see the appeal. And when that's also around the time when Blum started becoming more of a household name. And so I was fascinated to kind of to visit for the first time for this show. And my biggest takeaway is like, you have Ethan Hawke, who's a very competent actor surrounded by people that don't know how to say words. And
what about what's her name? Lena?
Oh yeah, the Game of Thrones.
She's the only other one.
She's okay, yeah, but everybody else is just like to the point where those like the actors who were playing the neighbors, it made me think like, oh. Are they hiding something, or are they just bad actors, or is it both?
They're bad actors. That's what it is.
It's like, yeah, it's one of those. Sometimes you see one of these Blumhouse productions, and you're like, oh yeah, like this. They're like, this doesn't look like it would cost $3 million. It looks like it costs like a lot more.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is a one where even down to like the whatever Lena's wig is terrible. And I was like, you really didn't want to. Yeah, you didn't really do like hair and makeup or like anything. The whole thing looks shoddy across the board. And it lives on the concept. You know, I think
one of those straight to Tubi movies. It seems
this is a movie where the sequel is a lot better. I actually saw the sequel. Yeah, the sequel I saw like earlier this year. I thought like, oh, let me go watch the Purge movies, and I heard the first one was bad, so I was going to skip that one. And I watched the second one, and the second one pretty much fulfills what you want from the concept, which is like it's in the streets. It's kind of like Escape from New York style, where it's just like. They're caught in Los Angeles, and they're running through the streets of Los Angeles trying to get out of the Purge. And the budget was, I think, at least double. According to Wikipedia, it's like $9 million. And instead,
not that much. Yeah.
Still not that much, but at least it can fulfill a little bit more. Whereas this one is just a boring invasion house thriller, and it's just like there's something cooler happening outside the house. Can we just see what's happening outside the house instead?
It's Let's talk a little bit about the politics of this. Let's dive into that world, because it's fascinating to me. The filmmaker is like, oh, this is his story. My wife said he basically got the idea from his wife. My wife said something in a road rage incident that stayed with me. This guy almost killed us, and she's a nice person. I hope this doesn't reflect poorly on her, but she said something like, I wish I had one a year, meaning one legal murder. It was a moment of anger, but the idea of one legal murder a year stayed with me. I don't know. Like, people say stuff when they're mad, but isn't that like sort of like a throwaway joke somebody would make? Like, why would you, the concept of it to me is like fascinating. And like, there's so much that you could do with that idea philosophically, and he does nothing with it.
Yeah, like, I mean, we don't see anything interesting.
There's no there's this weird sort of keeping up. Like, what was the motivation for their neighbors to kill them? Is that he sold them security systems and they made a lot of money? Like, that doesn't make any sense. That's not even like a basic emotional narrative.
It's the problem with the movie. The most fascinating things are just not addressed. Like, what if the next day, you don't kill your neighbor, you try to kill him, and it's just like, hey, neighbor, how you doing? How's the lawn mowing? Are you going to go back to fucking normal? I don't think so. I mean, we should have explored that.
Right. Yeah, it's like the decay of a society that does this. But and that's one of the things that, like, right away in the opening act, I think I texted Dan. I was like, either the people who made this movie did not read Thomas More's Utopia at all, or they just read it too many times. But it feels like this really basic kind of middle school read of Thomas More, where it's like they don't think through the aftermath and like what brings a society to a place like this to do something extreme. And the way that all the characters in that first act are just like, all right, let's get ready for another purge. And it's like there has to have been something to be the like precipitating incident to bring us there. That's the thing with speculative fiction, right? Is that you want it to be a place where like it could feel possible. And I think that even like it's weird that we pair this with Mad Max Fury Road, because that's a world that is so insane and absurd, and yet there are just enough background details and foregrounded archetypes to think like, of course, like you said, Dan, it's simplistic, but it's simplistic because it works. Like, we are obsessed with oil. That's never going to end, even in the apocalypse.
Yeah.
But here it's just like, people get mad, but it's not going to mean like I'm going to save all my mad for Purge night. Like, that's not how humans work.
It would be ridiculous if you're just like stewing over and over again. I mean, it's funny. I'm going to say the exact opposite thing I said about Fury Road. Fury Road was great because it didn't have exposition whatsoever. But the Purge, I almost would have loved to see a 90-minute exposition dump of just what's the Purge. Tell me everything about it. I need to know everything. Not Ethan Hawke's family.
One of the sequels does that. I feel like there's one recently.
One of them's like the first Purge or something like that.
Yeah.
But like, you think most people on Purge night would probably just do tax fraud or rob. Like, for me, I'd probably rob a Best Buy to get their Blu-rays or something like that.
That's pretty good. Yeah. That's the thing that I don't get to, is like, why the entire concept. It's like he doesn't understand the term purge or scapegoating, because it's like, the entire premise is that there's a one night of like lawlessness, and then all of a sudden that leads to like no unemployment.
Oh,
like,
right.
What? Like,
yeah. Like, what? Can you expand on that?
Yeah, like,
I'm sure my boss can still fire me because I killed his boss. Yeah.
I don't know. Here's the thing. This movie, it's a fun concept. It's kind of a fun idea. They thought they were going to do an independent film. Like, there was no thought process that they were going to like get
a one and done.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact they got Ethan Hawke.
Ethan Hawke, got a back end deal, so he got paid $10,000 to do this film. That's it. But he got back end numbers and ended up making like a few, like, I don't know, like $7 million or something like that.
Apparently, this is like the most money he's made off of one of his films, or like up there.
I believe it, because he's not in a lot of big stuff. But I think the funny thing about this is, you think about these different movies that we've talked about in Future Wars and how they all have these like, interesting concepts. And The Purge, I think, starts out with a really fascinating idea that's maybe kind of dumb, but also really fun. And they just, from a horror perspective, of course, and like, they just didn't have fun with it. It could have been a lot of fun. And they just didn't. It's so boring. It's a boring movie. And in
a lot of ways, it's a first draft. That's what it feels like to me.
Exactly. It's not. There's nothing. I find it hard to believe that someone comes up with this concept and doesn't have at least a few interesting flourishes in the movie. But this one is just like a snooze, pretty much the whole way through. And that dumb kid. I hate that kid.
Oh my god!
Well, I don't want to be like Mr. Plot Hole, but like, because I try not to do that in horror movies because wherever the movie happens. But like, why? First of all, why would you have your kid know the security alarm? I never knew the security alarm to my fucking house system.
It made me so
the Purge
mad.
wasn't a thing. Yeah. Like, when I was a kid, my dad would never give me the fucking codes to the security alarm. Are you kidding me? Like, that's the first mistake right there.
And they've already like set him up as a kid who's like extra curious, right? So it's like, and he's the guy that sells these systems.
It's the whole thing.
The whole movie reminds me of there's a 30 Rock joke where Jack Donaghy says to Liz Lemon, like, he's got a bunch of note cards and he's like, I've come up with all these punchlines, figure out how you get to them. And he's like, beep, 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 ribby, ribby. And it's like, that's kind of what they did here, is like, they came up with a punchline for a horror concept and like tried to say like, we'll figure it out. And unfortunately, it was enough to like spawn 5 films. That's
Has
nuts.
there been that many?
There's a TV show too. I mean, I'll give this
I forgot about the TV show. Yeah,
the first sequel I liked. I mean, it makes me expand on the concept, and I feel like this is a franchise that was able to become a franchise because this first movie was so bare bones.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And then they were like, okay, let me go back and let me explain more about the Purge for you.
And the sequel has Michael Kenneth Williams. Okay, I'm in. And Edward Hodge. Okay, I'm in.
Yeah. It's a decent B movie. I mean, it's essentially Escape from New York rip off, but I liked it.
You got to rip off something. Rip off Carpenter, right?
Yeah, of course.
Are you guys ready for trivia?
Yes, trivia. Let's do it.
I believe last time we had you on the show, Tommy, we did not do trivia. So let me just give you a quick primer on the rules. I have 5 films that fit our series theme. So that's future wars, movies that are set in a literal or speculative future, and there is some kind of major conflict between forces. And I've got keywords from the films, and I'm going to list them off from most to least esoteric order and see whether you or Dan is able to guess the film first. These are all
terrible at this. So.
He's so bad. You've got this in the bag, Tommy. And they're all from the 2010s. So that's the one clue you have. Is you got a decade period.
2010.
Okay.
Okay. So the first movie, let's go with. We always like to start with an easy one, especially when there's a guest on the show. Dakar.
Blade Runner 2049.
Oh, yeah. I forgot that's a different Dakar. Oh my gosh, I can't believe both these movies have a Dakar, just spelled differently. Okay. I'll keep going. Hosnian Prime.
What?
Fuck.
Jakku.
Jakku.
The Resistance.
Kubu.
It's
Star Wars. Yeah. Oh, good work, Wiper. Yes, Daniel got it.
Okay.
Which Star Wars?
Force Awakens. The first of the new trilogy.
I wish it was Rogue One.
Oh yeah, I know you do. No, okay. Next one. All right, Dan's got a point.
All right.
Next one. This one should be pretty good. Carriers. Militia. Donkeys. The Tribe.
Oh,
what's that?
Simeon Flew.
The Book of Eli.
Oh no.
I know this movie.
Contagion.
No,
it's not Future War.
Yeah, not a Future.
Right, that's like past war now. Here's a clue: donkeys is a term used for another animal in this film.
Oh, that doesn't help. That's just more confusing.
Yeah, no, that's crap.
Okay. Let's move to the cast list.
Okay.
Jason Clarke.
Oh, Planet of the Apes. Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
What's the theme again?
Post-war. Yeah. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
Keep going. You're almost there.
I've never seen any of these movies.
Is there an Evening of the Planet of the Apes?
Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah. Do we already forget the third film in the series is War for the Planet of the Apes?
Oh, no one's seen that.
Oh, War. Yeah, yes, I forgot about that.
That's not a real movie.
I'm going to give that point to Tommy because he got there first.
Yeah,
I saw it in theaters and it completely exited my mind.
Oh, yeah, I know. It's just action fest, and then you never think about it again. Okay, so 1-1. Next film. Okay, I got to lob one to the guest. I'm sorry, Dan. Braille. Cannibals.
Book of Eli.
There you go. Okay. That's what to your guess.
That's unfair. That's okay.
That's okay. We can be unfair. That's how war works, right? Okay, 2-1 in favor of the guest. Next film, number 4. Now we're getting a little more difficult. Geomorphologist.
Geostorm?
I wish. Lichens.
That's a great movie, by the way.
Lichens.
Oh,
Phosphorus grenade.
I know this.
What was it? Underworld? No, that's not 2010s.
The phosphorus.
Doppelganger.
Gosh darn it.
Oh, Gemini Man.
Ooh, that's a really good guess. But no lichens, I believe, in Gemini Man. Yeah. Final, this should be the nail in the coffin, so to speak. The Shimmer.
Oh, Annihilation.
There you go. 2-2.
Oh,
Oh man, and that's more of like a philosophical future war, in my opinion.
more of a lame future.
Oh, did you say perfect movie? Yeah. Okay.
It's unwatchable. Okay.
I still haven't seen it.
Oh, I highly recommend
Do
it. And
see it.
does not.
Do see it. Please do see
Yeah.
it. It's absurd.
Okay, last but not least, here's one that no one remembers. Combat drones. The Tet.
The Tet.
Titan, the moon of Saturn. Stasis
Pacific Rim?
pods. Very, very good guess. No.
Oblivion?
Yeah, good work, Dan. Okay, good job. That I almost lobbied for us to watch that movie for this
I
episode.
think you put it on the list.
I did put it on the list. I'm very glad you convinced me to take it off because I
like,
attempted to
no.
watch it.
No,
and
thank
it's so
you.
boring.
No, thank you, ma'am.
It's just because M83 did the soundtrack. That's all I wanted to do.
Love that E3. Oh man.
That was good. That was good. Thanks for playing, Tommy, and thanks for joining us on Film Trace. It's been lovely having you. Can you do one final plug for your show?
Yeah, thanks again for having me on, and you can follow me on social media at CNETPod. That's on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We're even on Threads, and yeah, we're doing Psycho. We just did Psycho, Saw, Carrie, and we're doing an episode on Casino next week. So stay tuned for that.
Oh, that'll be fun.
Woo,
That'll be a lot of
yeah.
fun.
Yeah, my first
Awesome.
time full watch, so I can't wait.
Oh, very cool. And then we got the 2000s, the 90s coming up, War of the Worlds, The Road, which I just rewatched. Yikes.
Never seen it.
And The Matrix and Starship Troopers coming up as well. So a lot in our future wars to play out here. As always, thanks for listening. This has been Film Trace.